This lecture is entitled Jan de Heem and the Baroque Still Life, or What on Earth is a Pronk? Now, Jan de Heem, who he depicted on the screen here in this portrait, was yet another of the leading still life painters working in the Netherlands. And he's famous for creating this new kind of still life, and it's called a Pronk still life. And we'll take a look in just a minute at a Pronk still life and see exactly what that's all about. But first, I just wanted to say there's something interesting you should note about Jan de Heem, and that is he actually worked in both Holland and Flanders. Now, we've been looking at Flemish art, which is the art of Flanders. Flemish. And as you should know, Flanders was Catholic. And we're going to be looking at Dutch art in the coming unit. And Dutch art is the art of Holland. So he's an interesting figure to look at right now because he bridged the gap between these distinct places, one Catholic, one Protestant, with a very different set of cultural mores guiding them. So now let's take a look at an example of Jan de Heem's still life painting. All right, so this is a characteristic still life by Jan de Heem, and it's a still life with fruit and a parrot, and it dates to 1650. And by this middle point in the century, still lifes had become even more lavish than the ones we've looked at so far. More lavish. And they became really over the top, and these really over the top still lifes are known simply as Pronk. That is what a Pronk still life is. And Pronk means ostentatious. And essentially, they are ostentatious displays of wealth and extravagance and luxury. So hopefully when you looked at this still life right away, you might have noticed a few things about it that might have caught your eye and said you yourself, okay, this is a really luxurious still life. And even if nothing caught your eye right away, I'll point out a few things to you and I think help you see exactly what it is that's different about this from some of the still lifes we've looked at before. What we have here, obviously we have what you would expect to see in a still life, in that there's food, there's perishable items, we have a lot of grapes, we have meat, we have oysters, we have oranges, and then of course we have the objects that go along with that. We have goblets and pitchers and trays, and then we have this parrot, which is an interesting addition because that's more of a object of curiosity. It's not so much a food stuff, but an interesting object. And then musical instruments and these rich overflowing curtains, things that we're used to seeing in a still life. But what's unique about this still life, and certainly to the contemporary viewer, it would have been a lot easier to read this. These items really just scream luxury, just over the top wealth. And that's because a lot of these objects are import luxury items, not things that a typical Flemish or Dutch person would see every day. The oysters, for example, the bird is a very exotic, imported, curious object. Even things like citrus fruits, oranges and lemons. We take those for granted. You go to the grocery store, you can buy a whole big bag of them and not spend a lot of money. In the 17th century, they were a luxury object that weren't so easy to get your hands on. So again, this is ostentatious, or it would have been very ostentatious to the contemporary viewer. And maybe it'll help you if you replace some of these objects in the painting, at least mentally, with things that you think of as extreme luxury items. Imagine instead of oranges, if those were iPods sitting here on the tray. And if instead of grapes, this is overflowing with caviar. And maybe you've got some expensive designer handbags overflowing on this tabletop. You get the point, right? That's essentially what these items were to this culture at the time. Another interesting thing about this, it's not only ostentatious and luxurious in what's depicted, but the way it's depicted is over the top as well. Again, we have tremendous attention to detail in textures. I like this detail over here, for example. You can see a reflection of a window in this glass, so really captured that sense of light reflecting off of glass. We can see that up here as well. So that same attention to texture and detail and color, but even the way the artist has assembled these items suggests luxury. If these items are so expensive, it's almost surprising to us that they would be assembled in such a careless way. They're just strewn across this tabletop. It doesn't seem like a lot of care has been given to them, which even suggests more wealth if someone can be so careless with such luxury items. So that's a very deliberate thing Jan de Heem has done here as well, is displayed the items in a way that suggests no care, the true sign of wealth. One final point I just wanted to ask you about is, where do you think this scene is located? I ask because there's this whole interesting side of the painting over here, and the scene seems to be set in front of a broken wall. It almost seems like an ancient ruin or something, the way the walls crumbled at the top there and there's vines growing along it. And then there's this expansive view into a really beautiful, almost idealized landscape. And that's a really interesting detail. I think it's interesting that he chose to depict his objects against this kind of setting because it removes it from the ordinary, even furthering that sense of luxury and almost puts it in a dreamlike, mystical setting. It's not a home, an ordinary place you would recognize. And let's scroll down for a second. Hopefully you recognize the image on the right, which is Frans Snijders' market stall. It's in stark contrast to this image as well. It's not in an identifiable commercial space. It's in this abstract, again, almost mystical, magical Neverland. So I think that's a really interesting detail that adds to that sense of luxury and ostentation. I wanted to close today by comparing this to the image that should hopefully be very familiar to you by now, Clara Peters. It's her still life that we looked at a while ago now. And I want you to try and ask yourself, how are these similar? How are these different? And I won't guide you. I want to leave you with this. You can pause it so you can keep the images on the screen. But ask yourself, what are some important differences between these? And what makes Jan de Heem's more luxurious and ostentatious, perhaps, than Clara Peters' image? So enjoy making your observations.